Kira-kira 300 hari perang di Gaza sudah bermula yang sudah pun mengorbankan lebih 38,000 rakyat Palestin, 16,000 daripadanya kanak-kanak. Ini termasuk 140 wartawan dan 193 pekerja PBB. Dunia semakin buntu sekarang bagaimana untuk menghentikan kekejaman Zionis di bumi Gaza. Tapi kami di Astro AWANI tidak akan jemu membincangkan cara-cara untuk kita mengejar keadilan untuk rakyat Palestin yang ditindas, termasuk daripada segi kerangka undang-undang antarabangsa dan sistem keadilan di peringkat global untuk menghentikan genosid ini. Itu fokus Dialog Tiga Penjuru untuk malam ini. Penyertai saya pada hari ini adalah Dr. Hans Christoph von Sponeck, United Nations former Assistant Secretary General, Rabbi Israel David Weiss, spokesperson for the worldwide religious group Neturei Karta, and also Professor Nazari Ismail, Honorary Professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics, University Malaya, and Director of Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, and also the Chairman of BDS Malaysia. Thanks so much all for joining us. I want to start with Dr. von Sponeck. When you talk about international law, how far does the current UN Charter and international laws criminalize acts like this, what's happening in Gaza?
In international law, United Nations Charter law, there's no room for war. There's no area where war can be legitimatized. There's only an opportunity to act in self-defense. That's Article 51 of the UN Charter makes that very clear. There's no room for any war. In the spirit of Dr. Tun Mahathir, who in any case tried to tell us in Malaysia and internationally that war is a crime. The UN thinks so too.
It's interesting you mentioned something about proportionate responses, because there is also something about proportionality. Many have criticized that even those who are more sympathetic of the attack towards Israel on October 7th are criticizing that the retaliation is far too disproportionate. So having all these systems in place, why are we still seeing what we are seeing today?
Well, I totally agree. There's no equivalence between what happened on the 7th of October and what happened afterwards. No question about it. So the discussion has to be, how can you resolve that? And then, of course, the eyes of the world turn towards the United Nations, and the United Nations is unable to do something about it, because it's no secret. I'm saying nothing new when I say the United Nations over the last 78 years has become a very West-centric organization, where power rather than law prevails. And that has prevented the Security Council from playing the role that we all, you and we, I in Germany, you in Malaysia, our rabbi in the US expect from a functioning United Nations. So the urgency of reform couldn't be greater.
We've seen this many times in the past, Doctor. We've seen this in the early 2000s when the US decided to attack Iraq and Afghanistan. You mentioned reforms. What kind of reforms are needed? Tun Mahathir himself has called for, the past few years, has called for a totally democratic system where each state gets a vote, a deciding vote, not just the Security Council. Only then can true democracy be achieved within the body of the United Nations. Do you believe this to be one of the solutions?
Well, what you need is a fundamental structural reform, a systemic reform. It cannot be, it can absolutely not be that we have 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, 3 of which are from the West. Africa is not represented at all. Asia is represented with 1 country, that's China.
It's the countries who won the war 70 years ago.
That's irrelevant. That was 1945, and we are living now in many years later. And the world has moved on with enormously greater complexity. And on the positive side, we can criticize endlessly, but on the positive side, it is clearly noticeable in recent years particularly this year, that the General Assembly is no longer willing, as a majority of countries, to accept the behavior of the Security Council, where you have 5 permanent members who were entrusted by the General Assembly to act on behalf of the full membership of the UN. That hasn't worked. Give me one example. You can look at Iraq, you can look at Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, at other places where the UN should have been acting and solving problems in accordance with its mandate, and it hasn't happened. So the reform urgency, that's my point, is there, and it doesn't lack proposals. What it lacks is political will.
Right. If and until these reforms are enacted, the UN will remain toothless to exact or affect real meaningful changes.
Yeah, and but you need a good dentist now. You need a dentist to repair the teeth so that the UN can bite. And the possibility exists. And I very much hope, that Malaysia will play its role on the 22nd, 23rd of September when the UN discusses the future of the United Nations in New York. And my hope is that your foreign ministry, but not only the foreign ministry, you have an unusual credential in the world with your NGO movement. The NGOs in Malaysia are better coordinated than in my own country. You have a coalition on Gaza, for example, that tries to jointly make proposals. The resolution that was passed yesterday is one example. And what I said yesterday I want to repeat, and that is Malaysia should not talk only to itself. Malaysia should go beyond Malaysian borders and make that message known. And I would strongly recommend that the coalition makes it known to the president of the forthcoming General Assembly of your position, which is a very healthy position, which is a contribution to UN reform. And hopefully, as you do that, you will get allies in all parts of the world, including Europe, because we are tired in Europe. We are tired, as you are, with a stalemate. The Security Council, to be a little bit floppy here, is in the icebox. There's nothing happening. And who pays the price for all that? The price is being paid by the people on the street.
Right.
And can I say just one last thing?
Sure.
It struck me that here is the charter that was my guideline for 32 years in the UN. Here is another charter. That's Dr. Tun Mahathir's War Crimes Commission, in which I was a member. This is the charter of international law. This is a charter on what to do about respecting international law. So it's a great combination.
All right. We'll circle back to that. Thanks, Doctor. I want to go to the Rabbi. Rabbi, you are the spokesperson for the worldwide religious group Nature Karta, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How do you rationalize being Jewish and anti-Zionist at the same time?
With the help of the Almighty, He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may convey His message. The question is exactly part of what the Arab and the Palestinian people call the Nakba, the calamity, because the question should be, on the contrary, Jewish people, because I am Jewish, we are therefore opposed to the creation, the existence of the Zionist state of Israel, because Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. 3,000 years we made a covenant with God to be subservient to the Almighty, to God. And the concept of establishing a nationhood, a land, a control over Palestine is anathema, is totally unacceptable according to the Jewish teaching. We're not allowed, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we're not allowed to create a Jewish sovereignty. We're certainly not allowed to create it by occupying another people, killing, stealing, and certainly not to a people as the Muslim and Arab people who for hundreds of years have embraced Jewish people when we went through the Inquisition and Crusades and many suffering, and the Muslim countries took us in. They brought us into their lands. We were able to coexist with a definitely different religion, a distinctly different religion, but the difference of religion was never an impediment to coexistence, to peace. So this is the way we were living, and then all of a sudden Zionism comes along and declares that they want to make a national home. They want to have a ersatz Judaism, a Judaism meaning a nationhood that's devoid, that takes God out of the equation, ignoring that we are forbidden to create our sovereignty, we're forbidden to steal from another people, oppress another people, and ignoring the words of all the spiritual leaders, the rabbis, the leaders of the communities. And so with their creation, they presented to the world a new narrative. This is Judaism, because it says in the Bible, God gave the children of Israel the land, therefore we have the right to take it. And when the Palestinian people stand up and oppose this, they're anti-Semitic, they hate the Jewish people. That is deplorable, that is repugnant and false. The occupation was created by a group of people from Europe, not the inhabitants of Palestine, the Jewish inhabitants, a group of people who had a vision, who had a goal to create a national home, a selfish, flawed political ideology. They were backed by, with the Balfour Declaration and different movements, they were backed by the European countries for whatever many reasons they had. And they went and the people, the indigenous populace, Muslim, Christian, Jewish people were ignored, and it was ratified by the United Nations. And then anybody who dares to say that, what are you doing to the people that are living there? And so they right away frowned upon, and they're again accused of being anti-Semitic, that they hate the Jews. We cannot be silent, Jewish people, because we are Jews. We therefore say, this is wrong, this is criminal. You can't take the people, homes and lives away from the Palestinian people, and what we're witnessing today, a genocide, a murder, and simply because you're dehumanizing them in the eyes of the world, you're saying that they're evil, they hate Jews. How dare they say that when we were living together? The Jewish community was living for hundreds of years in Jerusalem. So, as distinctly, as I say, God-fearing religious Jews with this God-fearing with religious Muslims living in the same courtyards, babysitting each other's children, and now all of a sudden you're accusing the Muslims that they hate the Jews and they don't want us, and how can I reconcile being a Jew together with us opposing the state? Wow, because we are Jews, in the hundreds of thousands we stand and demonstrate in the streets of Jerusalem, in the streets of the United Nations. Here Netanyahu will be coming tomorrow into the front of Congress, and you will see there'll be large demonstrations full of religious Jews, and the demonstrations are going for 76 years. We are demonstrating in the streets of Jerusalem, and they are being viciously beaten by the Zionists, by the police, the military, and the world is silent. They seem to accept that Zionism and the state is their patrons of Jews, the heroes of Jews, and they can't do wrong. But they're not. It's just like apartheid was accepted for so many tens of years, and even though it's totally unacceptable, but till the world changed their psyche, and they said no, apartheid is unacceptable by the grassroots, by people who stood up and just refused to be silent. But the nation, the United Nations, still as a body, stood up and said this is permissible to do it. The same thing with Israel. It's being accepted, but it shouldn't be accepted. It's flawed. It's flawed. It's not Jewish. And as I say, I would just like to mention the chief rabbi of Palestine pleaded in 1947 with the United Nations. His name was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory, and he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine."
This was when the Israeli state was about to be established.
About to be established. Now the Zionists went and they made a rabbinate. They used the Star of David, and they made their own rabbinate to give it the legitimacy, to give it the facade of holiness. But you can see through the facade when you look, the historic moment they made the Declaration of Independence, and you see David Ben-Gurion with all their henchmen sitting at the dais. You don't even see the rabbis there. You don't see anything, because it's not a Jewish state. It's a nationalist home that's simply using two weapons. One, the Bible, claiming God gave it to them, ignoring the voice of the very religious communities, whether I'm in New York, the largest Jewish community, the concentration of Jews right across from Manhattan in Brooklyn. There's not one Israeli flag, and that's invariably in any part of the world. The very religious will say, no, we do not accept this. We are crying with the people of Palestine. We are hurting with them. And the second is the vicious attacks. I'm coming again from, as I say, from New York. We went to college campuses, to Columbia, the university we've gone to, where they made encampments. And the professors and the students are being charged with being anti-Semitic, even though it's full of Jewish students who are anti-Zionist, and they're using its illogical attacks of being anti-Semitic because we are opposing the killing of human beings, of beautiful lives, men, women, children, and we cannot be silent. It's ungodly. And they're calling this anti-Semitic. And it's making cheap the word anti-Semitism. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father escaped. And we were Jews. We are Jews, and we suffered for being a Jew. And so that was the Semitism, the word meant something. And now they're cheapening the word by using it when somebody is committing a crime, and if you stand up and oppose it, he gets labeled anti-Semitic. You've thrown out that word anti-Semitism. If anything, we say that the personification of anti-Semitism is Zionism in the state of Israel. For 76 years, they're perpetrating crimes day in and day out that is not Jewish. It's against what we as a Jew are to be. Just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. And our rabbis are standing and crying with this. We are hurting with the people of Palestine and pleading with the world leaders, the United Nations. Take an example, what they did with South Africa. They changed it, and this has to be done. They have to recognize that it was a mistake.
So just to be clear, what's happening today, in fact, what's happening for the past 70-odd years, is fundamentally against Judaism and its teachings and its scriptures.
100% so. And that is why there is a dual rabbinate. There is a community living there that was living there for hundreds of years that's still existing there. In the hundreds of thousands, they're anti-Zionist. They refuse to vote, many of them. Of course, they refuse to serve in the army, and they get arrested. And maybe people heard the turmoil, what's going on there, because they're trying to force people to go there. And even though they're making it a picture as if it's the religious but they're ignoring the true religious communities that are saying, no, not in our name, it's not Judaism, and we will never accept it. And we plead with the world, stop this the carnage, stop this injustice.
So in Malaysia, I think I dare say that we are doing and we have done everything that we can to the best of our abilities. I think as Dr. von Sponek mentioned just now, it's about power as well. And we don't have a lot of power on the international stage. We are a small country. But we do what we can. And one of the ways that we've been doing it is through the boycott, divestments and sanctions movement, to which you're the chairman of, Professor Nazari. Many people have also doubted the effectiveness of this movement for the past few months, for the past year or so. What can you share in terms of how effective the BDS movement has been to help the plight and the cause of the Palestinians?
Okay, thank you very much. Before I explain the victories that we have achieved so far, we want to give hope to people. The people are witnessing that governments around the world are not doing enough to protect the Palestinians from the genocide that is ongoing at the moment. In fact, some countries, America and some Western countries, are even helping the genocide to take place, giving weapons and helping Israel to kill Palestinians. So people all over the world are very disappointed. They also see that UN is not able to do anything much. But yes, the people can do something. People of conscience around the world can do something by engaging in boycott efforts. We can do something by boycotting Israel and boycotting companies that are complicit with the crimes being committed by Israel at the moment. And there have been results. For example, for only 5 years, we campaigned against Puma, because Puma is complicit. They are the sponsor of the Israeli Football Federation, Football Association, which has clubs in the occupied territories, which is against international law. And Puma has announced already that they are no longer going to, they are not going to renew its contract with the Israeli Football Association. And why did they announce that? They announced it before Christmas last year because they were losing sales. Because people all over the world decided that, yes, we have to do something about it, and we listened to the call by the BDS movement, and they decided to boycott Puma, and Puma lost sales, and they decided, okay, that's it. We are not going to be renewing our contract. So that's just one example. There are other examples. There are companies that have left Israel, Veolia Waters, G4S. They have also terminated contracts over there because they were losing business, because people all over the world decided that they can do something about it, and what they can do is to boycott companies that are complicit with the injustice in Palestine.
Right. It's interesting, and it's actually heartwarming to see movements that joined by the likes of the Rabbi, where Judaism in its truest form is against what's happening now. But do you believe that in Malaysia, after decades of certain kinds of things being put on TV and on the airwaves and things like that, we are just painting everything with a broad brush? Because I have friends who actually look at all Jews as Zionists. Do you think we still have this problem in Malaysia?
Yes, we do have that problem. This misunderstanding about conflating Jewishness with Zionism. So that's our role as well, to explain to people that the BDS movement is not against Jews. We are against all form of racial discrimination. Zionism is racism, and so we are against all form of racism, including racism against the Jews. So, and we explain that Zionism it's not Judaism. We explain that Zionism is actually a movement that originated from Europe, that were actually started by secular Jews who didn't even believe in God, and then they decided to come to rob Palestinians of their land, to kick out the Palestinians and kill them, and that has got nothing to do with the Jewish religion. We do explain that, alhamdulillah, slowly, and with the presence of the rabbi here in Malaysia to explain things, people are beginning to see the difference. And now we hear people in Malaysia talking about, we are anti-Zionism. They don't talk about Jews that much anymore. Some are still ignorant, but alhamdulillah, things are improving. And when it comes to broad brush also, not only we must focus on the evil of Zionism, we must also boycott the companies that are really complicit. And that's what we are doing also. We have lists, we have a research group that study the companies that are complicit, and we call the public to focus on these companies to make sure that they will be scared to be complicit with Israel.
Yeah. Those are the smaller scale things that we do on the level of Malaysia. But we need bigger scale things as well, like via the UN, as Dr. mentioned just now. You mentioned reforms are needed, and I couldn't agree more. But how do we start? How does it start? Does it start with the most powerful countries actually taking initiative, the likes of US, etc.? How does it start, Doctor?
Before I answer this, I would just like, if you allow me, to say something about BDS Malaysia in comparison to BDS Europe. In my country, about 2.5 years ago, BDS was debated in the German parliament, and there was an effort to declare anyone who signed the BDS, as I did, as a criminal. A huge difference. What we heard yesterday from the professor, a chart which shows which companies were under attack, which companies had to do, where there had to be disinvestment, where there had to be exclusion, whatever. That was a very tangible, concrete reaction to the issue. We don't have that. So Malaysia, in a way, to me, is an example to us in Europe how to handle BDS responsibly. The German law was never passed, thanks God, but there is no attempt. Anyone in Germany now who wants to interact with the media and who is known to be a supporter of BDS, mainstream media will not have any interest in that person. So that's that. Coming to your question about UN reform, there's an enormously clear, transparent pivot, a change in the attitude of the global community of nations. Unfortunately, I use the wrong word because it's not a community, it's anything but a community, but the group of nations, the 193. If you look at the voting pattern in the General Assembly over the last few years, you will see a very distinct change towards a majority that says enough is enough. We do not accept, and this is now, I'm not an ideologist. I have been a civil servant in the UN for 32 years. I know my United Nations. So the UN now, the membership wants to insist that the Security Council, particularly the permanent five, accept the responsibility that was given to them by whom? By the General Assembly. The General Assembly said, you act in confidence, we give you the authority to act on our behalf. You don't do this, so now you have voices that start becoming louder in the General Assembly that said, if that is so, we are considering now withdrawing the authority from you to act on our behalf. That's an incredibly powerful change, and it shows that the non-Western countries are gradually coming to the forefront, show signs of responsibility. It's not a black and white picture at all, but it's a trend that one has to notice. And there are many other aspects to defining international relations as they exist today that one could talk about. There's no time for that. I just want to throw in one, and that is corruption. And if you allow me, one last key term in my vocabulary is accountability. We cannot have an international order where the powerful can commit crimes, as Dr. Mahathir would say, wars are crimes, and go free, while the weak ones, the losers, are being punished. So accountability has to become absolutely an integral part of the international vocabulary. And that's part of what I hope will be discussed as a beginning. The September summit in New York is just an overdue, because according to the UN Charter, that what is happening in September now should have happened in 1955, way late. But it's not too late, it's a beginning. And I repeat, you said Malaysia is a small country. Switzerland is also a small country. Fiji is a small country. These smaller countries, and you are not so small, should come together. This is why my last point I want to stress, maybe I overdo it in my enthusiasm, but I want to say, don't keep your initiatives under lock. Speak out and share. And you will see you have many like-minded in my country too. When they hear, and the professor allowed me to take back to Germany the information about BDS Malaysia, there's a learning process. We can learn from Malaysia in that respect, and the more we link up, no monologues, dialogues, interaction, the better it is for the reform process of the United Nations.
Do you agree with the two-state solution, Doctor?
Do I?
Yeah. I want to ask all of you this, but I'll start with you.
Yesterday, somebody was baffled because in my statement I said, of course. And when you talk about two-state solution, please, can you imagine what a one-state solution would mean after Gaza? Where there is not a single, I dare to say, I have no evidence that it's correct, but I think it's correct, that there's not a single Palestinian who is not traumatized, some more than others. And then you want to have a one-state solution? Ridiculous. But apart from that, a two-state solution, unfortunately, some of my Israeli friends, I have Israeli friends, tell me, like Jeff Halper, you may know Jeff Halper, is one bold, courageous man, who said, no, one state. No, I think there is a revival of this concept of a two-state solution that I can see in the debate in Europe.
How about you, Rabbi? Because you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that Judaism in its truest form has resigned to the fact that Jews may never have a land of their own, especially after the destruction of the temple. Is this true, and are you therefore for or against the two-state solution?
With the help of the Almighty, Judaism is the belief that the Almighty rules the world. We were sent into exile 2,000 years ago. There will come a time where God will make a metaphysical change in the world, where all humanity will stop being atheists, they'll believe in one God, and as there's different verses, one says that all nations will join together and come serve God in harmony. So we believe God, at the end of time, will build a temple himself without any human intervention. So it's a metaphysical change, a concept which we can't understand. Jews look forward to that day, and we yearn and we pray for the day of returning. We do not say that we gave up on returning. On the contrary, every Jew, Orthodox Jew, and and this is a thing which every Muslim scholar knows, and it was never an impediment to coexistence. Yes, we yearn to return, but not in the form of the Zionist state of Israel, where they're taking a gun and taking over the land. We believe that it will be a godly change in the world, where all humanity will live together, and as it says in front of the UN, right across from the UN, Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, I always talk about that. It says a verse of Isaiah. It says that the wolf and the sheep will live together, and they will beat the swords into plowshares. There will be war no more. That's a verse, a very big, beautiful wall right across from the United Nations, called the Isaiah Wall, over there by Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. This is a concept which we cannot understand today. And Dr. Hans, when he's talking, he says he can't see how this can be resolved. But we as a Jew do hope to return. And but we are not a threat for the Palestinian people, and never have been, because we do not aspire to take a gun and take over the land of our neighbors, of our patrons, the people who took us in. It's a concept of when we will repent, we believe the world will serve God, and God will make a change in the world. But till that day comes, we are expressly forbidden to create even 1 inch, 1 centimeter of Jewish sovereignty in uninhabited land, and certainly not in a land that has been inhabited by others that take the land away.
So not the two-state solution.
So we are never, we're never allowed to have this. When they made the concept at the Camp David Accords, we were in Washington, we were in Madrid. Yep. Our rabbi said that we are celebrating for what has returned to the Palestinian people, where they thought that it would work. But we don't want to be naysayers, but we said this cannot bring peace, because the Jewish people are not permitted by God to have this state. Now, I would say it's really critical to understand that we have to distinguish between what the problem is, that the world should be able to diagnose, identify what the problem, which is that there came a movement of people from Europe and decided to create a state in a land that wasn't theirs, that had no right to do it. Because if you want to confuse this with a conflict of wars between Islam, Muslims and Jews, Arab nations and Jews, that is where the quagmire, all the problems is, because you don't have a solution, because you're tackling the issue. You don't know the issue. It's like a doctor giving cortisone for a hemorrhaging wound. It doesn't make sense. You cannot give a solution to it, and that's why it keeps on erupting. So first, let's distinguish what the problem is. An illegal thing happened here. They came, a group of people, some 76 years ago, or Balfour Declaration 107 years ago. They made a land grab. Once we understand that, now we have to search for a solution. Dr. Hans, which is a brilliant and distinguished and an actor who worked in the UN, says that it won't be practical, it cannot be a solution to simply dismantle the state. But we are saying, you see it never ends. You're only feeding into the monster billions of dollars of arms and military year in and year. So you think of new types of military, but let's just turn around and say, let's look at it like this. Again, first let's understand the problem we put on one side. Now let's talk about the solution. The people in South Africa, when they brutally beat the black people, right? And people said you cannot dismantle South Africa, but it was fear-mongering. We believe that if you will follow the laws, the words of God, you will have peace. Meaning that if you will turn to the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, of the Arab, every one of them. And we met with with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with the leaders of those communities. When there was a PLO, we had a representative in the Palestinian Authority, a rabbi, and they all said, they profess and they clearly state, we're not against Jews. The laymen, the people on the street, they also, the Palestinian people, we went to Gaza, we embraced the people in the hospitals, and they said, we want to live in peace with the Jews. Yes, they're traumatized. Yes, they've suffered beyond comprehension. But still in all, they want to be able to repair, to be able to live together. There are people who committed atrocities, and so let America, Canada, UK, Germany spend these billions of dollars, a limited amount that will be necessary, and let's place them in countries with the people who committed atrocities after they go through a court, whatever they have to for adjudicating what they did. But then they could settle, the ones who are uncomfortable. But as the rest of the people, we can live together. We want to live. We have a history of hundreds of years of coexistence. There is not an excuse to continue to stifle, to kill, to murder, to steal the land of the people because you say, I can't see a solution because I made a mistake, I'm stealing from a land and the people's homes, and I have to continue doing that because I don't know how to remedy the mistake.
No, I hope you're right. But do you think it's realistic that after decades of atrocities, that the society between Jews and Muslims in Palestine can be reintegrated ever?
With God's help, first of all, let the world acknowledge what the issue is here. Then we will be able to step up to the plate and first of all demand a ceasefire. Isn't demanding a ceasefire the first thing you should do? You're bombing people because because Israel is calling them evil. Is that an excuse because you made a mistake and you took their land? That's the first question. And then let's sit down with the minds and see if we can. I think if you follow what God's will was, it says, why you in the Torah it says, why are you rebelling against me? You will not be successful. They don't have 10 years of successful peace in their occupation. But if you would do what the will of God and the will of the humanity, they want to live in peace. I tell you, certainly they will demand a tribunal, they'll demand different things, and the ones, as I say, who committed these terrible atrocities may move to other countries. But the fact is that the people, if they will know that it's not their land, it's not Israel, and the Palestinians are these second-class human beings, if they'll know that we are living together, it's like living in New York. It's like, they will be able to live together. But if you don't think so, but let's first demand a ceasefire, and let's see what the world can come up with a better solution, but not, of course, by insisting that you're going to continue stealing and killing because you don't have a solution.
Of course. Prof. Nazari, what do you think the most realistic beginning to a solution is to this crisis?
Okay, well, I also want to say something about the two-state solution. If we understand Zionism, then we will know that the two-state solution will just be a dream. Why? Because the Zionists want to take everything and want to kick all the Palestinians out of the land. And they even said it recently. The parliament said that they want to get annex more land, and they are against this two-state solutions. So the way ahead, for me, I would say, don't waste time discussing about the two-state solution, and focus on the call of the BDS. I will say it out here. Number one, we call on for Israel to end its occupation and colonization of Arab lands and dismantling the apartheid wall. Number two, it must recognize the fundamental rights of the Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel to full equality, because they are being discriminated now. And number three, it must respect, protect, and promote the right of Palestinian refugees and displaced people to return to their homes and properties as stipulated in United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194. These are all passed or under the framework of international law. So in other words, what we are calling the whole community is to put pressure on Israel to respect international law. Focus on that. As long as they do not respect international law, we boycott them. We boycott all companies that are complicit. Only by doing that, we can put pressure on them or force them to give justice to the Palestinians. If we continue to discuss about the two-state solution, they will use the time during the negotiation to seize more lands, to commit more injustice to the Palestinians. So that's why we say, stop discussing about the two-state solution, focus on forcing Israel to comply with international law.
The two-state solution is the official line of the Malaysian government, but you think that's misguided?
Yeah, it's just a waste of time.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Right. You want to say something, Doctor?
Not directly on that, because then we became friends and we want to remain friends. But
you can disagree and just still
but
be
there's
friends.
Something else that one has to say. I mean, compassion, feelings, very important. But if you now put them aside for a moment and you just look at realpolitik, at the real facts on the ground,
Yep.
there's only one single government, a government that globally is losing much of the respect, much of the power it had before. But if you talk about a ceasefire, you can appeal with good rhetoric to the Israelis and you won't get a good response from the Israeli government. The Americans are the only entity today that can introduce a ceasefire by ending their dishonest double standard. On the one hand, you give peanuts in terms of humanitarian aid. On the other hand, almost concurrently, you increase the military supply. If you stop that, Mr. Netanyahu will run out of the power that he has now. But one more sentence here. We keep talking about Mr. Netanyahu. I think it's totally misleading to think that only since Mr. Netanyahu is in power, there is a Palestine problem. The Palestine problem is much older.
Yep.
And all the governments of Israel must realize if they want to do something which is in line with their national interests, they must begin to accept compromise and convergence and start negotiating so that what you disagree but I promote is a two-state solution.
Talking about...
Excuse me, I wanted to add that just
Sure.
they're using these public relations, powerful public relations firms. I think that in America they use AIPAC. They use every manner of convincing humanity, people around the world, that their cause is proper, is the godly way of looking at it, and that's where they should be supported, or at least people should not stand in their way. People either collude with them, or in certain countries, or at least they're complicit, or they're silent. This is a fact. Like I say, there is the people are this fear, this panic. People are afraid what will be the result if we stop this occupation. They're going to drive us into the sea. And it's false. It's totally false. Again, we lived for peace. Why? History is always, you can look at history and see how it was. Jews and Muslims are able to live in peace. We've lived in all the countries in peace. So why can't you look at that? And as the people, as I explained, they're living in their knowledge that it's their country. They have to watch and be careful from the Palestinians. But if it would be like a country that's equal, people living in England. I went to England many times. You have in London, you have a mosque, a synagogue, a mosque, a synagogue. For 40, 50 years and more, they're living on the most religious Jewish community. Again, by the way, you won't find an Israeli flag there. In Stamford Hills, they're living together through hard times, through the Six-Day War, through all this terrible, the intifadas and everything. They're living there together, and they're not killing each other. Why? Because it's a false narrative. You will, again, the world has to grab Zionism by its hand and say, you cannot lead us by the nose. You can't do this anymore. It's wrong. It's patently wrong. And the world, as the United Nations, they have to stop what's happening, and then you will see that we can live in peace. It's the fact of life that we will be able to live in peace, because the normal Jew on the street is not a monster that he wants to take over. They're using this fear-mongering. It's the governments, it's the leadership over there, with God's help, and it will work out. And again, if you have another way, but you can't continue doing what you're doing. This is impossible. It's against God. So you cannot take the people of Gaza and use them as the beating stick that you're going to use because you don't have a solution.
Right. I want to go back to what Dr. von Sponeck said just now. want to put on my realist Machiavellian hat, because you mentioned that at the end of the day, real meaningful change can only be, well, debatably can only be started or affected by the most powerful nation of them all, the United States. I mean, Joe Biden himself has gone on record for the past few decades saying how important Israel is to the US. And he was even quoted as saying that if Israel ceases to exist, the US has to create another Israel. That's what he said, I think about 20 or 30 years ago. So in getting the US to fall in line and to start doing the right thing, I think how nations think is that the world has to ensure that their national interests will continue to be safeguarded, despite the fact that there will probably be no Israel moving forward. So how do you ensure that the US interests are still taken care of if they actually go this route? Because that has been the main hindrance in them actually not cooperating and imposing this so-called double standard that you mentioned.
Well, you know, we mustn't equate the situation in Gaza, Israel, and the US in a broader context. That's wrong. The question that what I said was, America, as far as Israel is concerned, has the power. America, in a global geopolitical context, is getting much smaller, maybe smaller than Malaysia. The fact is, America is in a situation of deep internal and external problems. And Israel is one dramatic example. I do not at all subscribe to the idea that the world needs Israel. The need of the world is compliance with the law that we have created, the law that America has helped to create and then dropped out. And when that happens, we are on the right path. And America must understand, it was the Turkish Prime Minister who said the world is bigger than five. It's bigger than the 5 permanent members. And it is, and I would say it is bigger than the UN, because civil society plays a role also. So when you put all of that together, then you begin to realize that the path on which the Western world, particularly America, is traveling is a confrontational path which lets us assume that no one is a winner. This ridiculous effort to brainwash us in the Western world that China is the big new enemy is a prime example of how not to proceed. So the countries, the non-Western countries, now must get better organized and come forward with support of that which was long ago agreed, that needs some reforms, no doubt, but basically the Charter is today as relevant as it was in 1945. And then we can maybe see a little bit of light at the end of this complicated, long tunnel of disinformation. I totally agree with you here. In Europe, maybe in Malaysia too, I don't know. But in Europe, it is very difficult to get a clear, objective understanding of what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening elsewhere. So there's a lot of challenge ahead of us, but I'm optimistic, and maybe that's my last point I want to make. I'm optimistic that civil society that was shy, that was ignored, is changing, is coming forward, is playing a role. We see that. Let us not underestimate what he and his team is doing with regard to making a concrete difference. We all talk. We all have good rhetoric, some better than others. It doesn't matter. We talk about human rights. The justification of a human rights lies in its implementation. And when that happens, then we may win the battle.
Yeah. I'll end with Prof. Nazari, but I just want to squeeze one in with the Rabbi, because I feel that I have to ask this. Your country is about to have new leadership. The US presidential elections is happening in a few months. I don't want to ask you about Trump, because his policies are known. He has been the president. But we have a new face now. We have Kamala Harris after Joe Biden's dropped out. Biden's policies are quite known, but there is some degree of optimism about how a Harris presidency would look like with regards to the Gaza conflict. How do you think President Harris would approach the Gaza conflict?
With the help of the money, first of all, I neglected to say that we came here to a conference where Dr. Mahathir was supposed to be the keynote speaker, and I was looking very much forward. And he's presently not well,
yep.
So we were all praying to the Almighty that he should have a speedy recovery. And he has been a light. As the press mentioned, and then Dr. Hans mentioned, that he stood in the forefront of in elucidating in clear what is proper. He differentiated beautifully between Judaism and Zionism. I personally had the great privilege of meeting with him about, and he constantly spoke about this, that it's not a conflict of religion, it's a flawed, like we've spoken, Zionism in the state of Israel is just a flawed concept, and it must be, we believe, totally, speedily and peacefully removed. Then we can have a peaceful coexistence. So he's a light unto this, and I hope that he can further go ahead and continue lead the way. He's a power, and he should be able to do it. The age doesn't diminish his power,
yeah.
and but in regard to the United States, we have first of all, it's very also interesting to note the Jewish person has to be respectful, pray for the well-being of the country they're residing, pray for it, and be loyal citizens. So we always speak, even when we're demonstrating, constantly for all 76 years or whatever, we're standing in front of the White House and the United Nations. We always speak, we plead with our leaders, and we look, regardless of who the president may be, that we plead with them that they should not be intimidated by the power of Zionism, and they should understand it's not against Judaism. They should stand for a free Palestine, and they should bring peace back to the way it was. Again, it's the issue here is that you're finding there's fear. It's fear. It's that people cannot look at it under a normal prism to understand what the problem is. As you mentioned, we're not even sure that Kamala Harris will be the president. We don't know. I mean, whether will be even the Democratic candidate for. So we don't know for sure. But in our prayers we say that every high holiday we say that God should put in the heart of the rulers and leaders of the kings and leaders of the world that they should strive for peace. And so we are hoping that God, with his compassion, should give us a leader who will be striving for what's righteous and peace. It's very possible that she is not under the pressure that if she will become president, the previous one's candidates were, and she should be, and she witnessed the last year of the voice of the grassroots of the people in universities and colleges, professors, students, and she heard and saw the issue of Palestine, and it's blatant, the truth of what's being done there, that she may take another step. She didn't have to run along a campaign to become obligated to so many different people. Maybe there will be a change, and God can help, whatever it is, and whoever it may be in that seat. We hope that they will leave America, and will be helping the United Nations to lead, that the world should be a place of peace, prescribing to that we should live all nations together in peace.
Right. Thanks, Rabbi. Finally, Prof, in the 1 minute that we have left, what's next for the Free Palestine movement in Malaysia?
Yeah, the world must isolate Israel. Must also boycott companies that are complicit. As Dr. Hans just now mentioned, that Malaysia is not really a small country. It has got significance in the world, and it can play a larger role. It can call the world community to isolate Israel, call the other Muslim countries to isolate Israel, to break off diplomatic relations, trade relations with Israel. Malaysia should show an example to other Muslim countries. We are able to do that. Our economy is okay, even though we don't have any trade relations with Israel. Why can't other countries do the same? Malaysia, the government, the people should work harder to boycott Israel and boycott all the complicit companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nazari Ismail, Dr. Hans Christoph von Sponeck, and Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss. And thank you so much for watching Dialog Tiga Penjuru. Kita jumpa lagi dalam episod seterusnya. Assalamualaikum dan salam hormat.